Greetings everyone, I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. As you can tell from the title up there, I'm continuing my trek through the films made in the period known in retrospect as the Disney Renaissance. We're about halfway there. This is going to be the sixth entry, and unlike the previous one, I did not see it in theaters, but I did watch it at home a lot. In fact, using the very VHS I have in my hands. This, of course, is a film released in 1995, directed by Mike Gabriel, who also did The Rescuers Down Under, and Eric Goldberg, who worked on Aladdin as a supervising animator, would work on Hercules as a supervising animator, and would later be the animation director for Looney Tunes Back in Action. This, of course, is Pocahontas. Now, like I mentioned at the end of the previous review, this is going to be one that might be a little polarizing based on my take on it, depending on how I felt, because like with The Little Mermaid, it has been ages since I've watched this film. I can't remember off the top of my head if I saw this or Little Mermaid last. I would want to think Little Mermaid, at least in passing, is the last one I watched. But compared to the other films released before and after in the Disney Renaissance, this one was not in the rotation as much. I would rather watch the other ones. And just going off memory, I can never put my finger on it, but having gone back and rewatched it for this video, I can safely see the reason for now. I still do enjoy the film. It's just, it doesn't capture the same magic. Now, a little bit of that might be the fact that as a student of history, I know that it is not 100% accurate, but when it's a drama film, I usually will put that a little bit aside, even if it's extremely egregious, like film released around the same time period that also has Mel Gibson in it, funny enough, Braveheart. Horrible film when it comes to historical accuracy. Excellent film when it comes to a piece of artwork. So it can straddle that line. I think part of it is just the whole thing is just not as engaging as, say, the love story is not as engaging as Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and even Hercules, which was released after this. Definitely grabs you a bit more, and even Tarzan. So of the Disney Renaissance films, it has the least engaging romance. And that's even before you factor in that it would not have been historical accurate. What really does grab it, though, is the music and the animation, which you'll get to. Now, since I brought it up, I should probably address the elephant in the room, and that is the historical accuracy. This film is not very historically accurate. Now, there are aspects of the film that definitely are inspired by history, like the way that the Europeans, I would say the British, but one of the characters has a Scottish accent. I guess you could still say British there, but some people would be like, excuse me. The way that they treat the natives, or the whole colonization thing, that it's a little rushed timeline-wise, but it fits in with history. The fact that John Smith was respected by his people, that definitely is there. Seems a little rushed too from what I remember. It's been a while since I've learned about that part of history specifically, so I'm going off memory with that, but that memory is more recent than memory of when I watched this last. And of course the whole othering thing, which comes up in a couple of the songs, definitely accurate. And of course there's the whole meme about how one line in this film sums up native history with dealing with Europeans. These white men are dangerous. Very true, especially when you look at constant treaties being broken and all that, but I'm not going to get too far into that rabbit hole here, just got to bring that up. The major thing, of course, is the fact that there was no love story between John Smith and Pocahontas, and the main reason for that is that at the time that she would have known him, she was 12. Now, some places that would not be a deal breaker, I have to say, sadly, at least when it comes to betrothal, but in this case, no. There is nothing in the historical record that would insinuate that there was any type of romantic thing. Now, I know in John Smith's accounts he does kind of bump it up a little bit more. He doesn't go to that extent, but makes it seem like they had more of a friendship than they probably did. It's one of those things where you got to really read between the lines when it comes to it. Here, though, Disney bumping up Pocahontas' age and then making it a love story, definitely not historically accurate. And even on the making of, they mentioned that part of the reason for that was for that to be an emotional anchor in the film. Trying to think of the right word there. Which I can definitely see from a story perspective why you do that. Not accurate, but I can see why for drama. Now, with that said, with everything that's kind of abridged and changed from the historical record, if you look at it as the filmmakers adapting more of the legend of Pocahontas and John Smith than the actual historical account, you're going to have a lot more of a fun time. Now, I know there are some people in retrospect that are disappointed, both native and non-native alike. I mean, even one of the people that they hired on to help with the film was disappointed on that, which when I talk more about the making of it in a moment, I'll get into that. But I can't really say they're wrong, and I know some people are probably going to jump on me and be like, well, you can't have that opinion of that, you're white, and like that. As I think I've brought up at least one other time before, I'm white on my mother's side. On my father's side, I mean, it is, I say Mexican and all that, but Mexican means a lot of things when you look at historical record. One of the things is it means native. There are native Mexicans. My family is part of that. Yaqui, Apache, Tohono. Now, I didn't grow up in res culture. Can't say near a res because there's a bunch of tribal casinos around where I live, but so I say I didn't grow up in res culture and all that. So I'm not going to say that someone who grew up on one or near one or whatever one, a crossroads thing you want to throw in there, is wrong for not liking this film due to that, feeling disrespected or just not liking it. I can't say that they're wrong, but they also can't say I'm wrong for the way I approach it and the way I enjoy it. Because I am admitting it's not historical accurate, but that's not a deal breaker for me. And it's not the first time that Disney has adapted more of the legend of a character than the historical record. See their Davy Crockett films. That's more based on the legend of Davy Crockett than it is historical fact. Mainly because in the second one it takes place after he would have died, and he's still there. Even though I think it might be a prequel, but my point still stands. It's more based on his legend. King of the Wild Frontier and all. And of course, like I mentioned already with Braveheart, that's more based on the legend of William Wallace and the Scottish trying to gain independence than it is any historical fact. Now, if you don't like the film, each their own. Now, going to get a little bit into talking about how this film was made and a little bit more of my thoughts. Now, I mentioned Mel Gibson is in here. He voices John Smith. Then we got Irene Bedard as Pocahontas, who she was also in another film made around this time that, from what I understand, is big in res culture, and that's Smoke Signals. I only know that through TikTok. Hey, Victor! I just never saw that as a kid. A film that's on the to-watch list. And, of course, she would later go on to be in the film The New World, which is also based around the same incident of Europeans meeting natives, but instead of playing Pocahontas there, she played Pocahontas' mother. And of course we got David Ogden Stirs, who of course played Cogsworth in Beauty and the Beast. He's back, voicing two characters, Governor Radcliffe and his assistant, and he gives different voices for both of them. His voice for Radcliffe definitely is the same as Cogsworth, it's just his enunciation in his performance that sets the character apart. You got a younger Christian Bale, and here is Thomas. And if you know him from when he puts on an American accent, regardless of what type, you might not recognize his voice, but part of it's also because he's a bit younger here, so his voice is a little lighter. But having heard his British accent before, I'm like, oh yeah, that's him. Got Russell Means, legendary native actor, voicing Chief Powhatan, Pocahontas' father. And he's in the making of, and this is another reason that just looking at this stuff, I'm like, okay, if he says that, who are we to judge, really? Now, part of it could be that she's saying this because it's an official thing for the film, so of course he's not going to lambast it. Could be what he was thinking at the time, but he thought it was probably one of the better films made involving and being about natives that Hollywood had done at that time. Which, if you know the history of Native Americans in Hollywood, both characters and actors, you can see the importance of that. I got Billy Connolly as Ben, the Scottish character. We got Linda Hunt voicing Grandmother Willow. And then, of course, Gordon, I'm probably going to butcher this last name, Tudosis. Like I said, sorry if I butchered that. Who voices Kikata, who is the Medicine Man Shaman character. He's also legendary for playing the character Stone Fox in the made-for-TV film. That's a book I remember from my elementary school days, Stone Fox, all that ending. Either one of you step over that line, you get shot. And of course, this is from a screenplay written and a writing team by Carl Binder, who did episodes of different Stargate TV episodes and different episodes of Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman. Susanna Grant, who would go on to get an Oscar nomination years later for Aaron Brockovich, and Philip Lazebic, who would also be involved in Mulan, Prince of Egypt, and Road to El Dorado. Which, considering that all of those films kind of involve Katzenberg, you can kind of see why he was involved. Now, the beginning of this film start with director Mike Gabriel because he wanted to collaborate with artist Joe Grant. And the project I brought up a couple times before, which was eventually canceled, Swan Lake, which apparently that was because of negative reaction from the script readers, led to this idea coming about. Because one Thanksgiving, I don't think I really need to point out the irony there. He was looking at a relative's bookcase, saw it, and then he's like, that could work. He pitched it to Eisner, Katzenberg, and Roy E. Disney, and along with Peter Schneider with the title Over a Picture of Tiger Lily. A little bit of irony there. And this is what he put: an Indian princess who is torn between her father's wishes to destroy the English settlers and her wishes to help them. A girl caught between her father and her people and her love for the enemy. Schneider at this time was developing a Romeo-Juliet idea, and there were similarities. And this is what he had to say about it. We were particularly interested in exploring the theme of if we don't learn to live with one another, we will destroy ourselves. And if there is any theme that really goes through the final part of the film, that is that. Is that if we let our differences get the better of it ourselves, we'll destroy ourselves. Now, Katzenberg, he backed the romantic story idea for this film, mainly because Beauty and the Beast was successful, winning Oscars, and it was the newest idea, so he's like, yeah. Now, of course, because of this is why they had to age up Pocahontas. They added a little bit more of a mature love to the thing, even though, like I mentioned, it is very rushed. And they had to mute animals, because I guess in the original idea, the animals talked. Which, watching the film, I'm like, I cannot see how this film would work with talking animals. It just doesn't seem like it would. I mean, maybe that's why there's a lot of moments with the animals, but it just doesn't seem like it'd work with the dog talking, unless they were talking and only the audience and the Grandmother Willow understood them, but nobody else could. But even then, it would be distracting and probably mess with the tone a bit. Now, Goldberg, he wanted the film to be comedic, which, watching the film, I'm trying to imagine how a lot of comedy would work in this film, because there is some. I mean, the character Wiggins, the animals, and all that. And then some other dialogue from the side characters that's kind of dry or dark. But being like a full-on comedy, like some of the later films that Eisner was involved in, like Road to El Dorado, I just cannot imagine this film working as a straight-up comedy, given the nature of the source material. Now, what convinced Goldberg to commit to the theme that they went for with this film was the '92 LA riots. Probably watching all the news coverage and being like, yeah, this type of tone could work. And while they were working on it, Susanna Grant wrote to a specific story outline, and known scene was rewritten no more than 35 times until she felt it was perfect. And you can kind of see that in a lot of the moments. A lot of the moments definitely feel tight writing-wise, like there's no room for error when it comes to the scripting. Even though there are a couple moments where it kind of jumps a bit, but part of that was because of deleted sequences, which I found out about because I watched it via Disney Plus and it actually has them on there. I only watched a couple of them. I'm like, oh yeah, I can see why this was abridged, why this part was cut out. Like one moment where John Smith escapes, I'm like, yeah, that would make a little bit of a weird story thing there. And of course, like things go in production, sometimes things will change. One of them was that originally the character of Grandmother Willow was written as a male character who was a spirit of the river called Old Man River. Which, given the whole thing about river, I can see why they would go there. And the character in the song Just Around the River Bend was originally written for him to sing. And the person they offered the role was, of course, the legendary Gregory Peck. Which I'm like, that's an interesting little casting choice. Would have been interesting. Now, he admitted that it pained him to do it, but he turned it down because he felt that the title character needed a motherly figure to go to for advice. Which makes sense, considering that she has a paternal figure in her life. They constantly talk about her mother. You know, you look so much like your mother if all your mother is still here. So it makes more sense for her other parental figure that is from nature to be a female character. And of course they changed it, and all for the better. And of course Linda Hunt, excellent. Now, while making the film, to go with authenticity, Disney Studios hired a lot of Native American actors and actresses to do the voices, and that really does come across in the voices. It doesn't really feel like characters putting on voices. Like if you watch some of the older animations with native characters, you can definitely tell it's a non-native character either putting on one or they're really selling it to go more into the stereotype of it. Now, sometimes something like that could work. See Mel Brooks and Blazing Saddles, because in that whole thing they're making fun of racism in general. Here, going there, you really need that. And of course, they also employed Native American consultants, had a session with a real shaman, and of course they visited the location of Jamestown and a lot of Virginia in order to get inspiration for the artwork. Now, despite all these efforts, prominent Native American activists issued an open letter condemning the movie for its historical inaccuracies, which, like I've already addressed, their opinion and all that, so can't fault them there, and stereotyping of the Native American people, which, in the final film, the only thing I can really see with that is maybe a little bit of the whole in view with nature thing, that they really are going to it, really selling into it, to where it could come across as a little, what's the right way to phrase this? Demeaning, maybe? No, I could see that. And like I already mentioned, Russell Means, he really defended it. And of course, you can really see in how they drew Powhatan that they really kind of based his design off of him too. And he really defended it, so it really shows that it meant a lot to him. So I guess this is one of those things that's different strokes for different folks. And it could also be that the fact that it's not as grounded in history as it should be, or as they thought it should be, that they're letting that cloud their judgment. If so, I mean, their opinion, but it's a little, yeah. Now, part of this is they also visited the, I'm probably going to butcher this, so sorry, Pamunkey Indian Reservation, and they conducted interviews with historians at Old Dominion University. Costello McGowan served as a consultant traveling to the Disney Studios 3 times and offered her services for free, but Disney paid her a $500 daily consulting fee plus expenses. Now, when it came to light about the historical accuracy not being pursued, she voiced her feelings of shame in conjunction with her work on the film, saying she wished her name wasn't on it, which, like I said already, can't really fault her for that opinion, but one of those things, different strokes, different folks. Now, I've talked about it at length. So, the plot of the film is that it takes place in 1607, as the opening song talks about. The Virginia Company is setting up a charter to travel from England to what would become Virginia to set up a colony. It, of course, is being led by a man named Radcliffe, who will be the governor there. Now, as we see in the beginning, while he is part of the elite, he's not a lord. He's like kind of like up. He's like not a peasant, but not a lord, so he's somewhere in the middle. I mean, he calls King James his friend, so at least they know each other. So they're at least on friendly speaking terms. As we hear from dialogue with the characters, is that people make fun of him. Part of that is likely due to the fact that he has never done anything of substance that he could really strike his name and be like, yeah, ha ha. And this seems to be his last chance, and he wants to do it. and they're traveling there for various reasons. Some people want adventures. Some of the characters, as you see, they want to battle the natives. And of course, that's why they got John Smith there, because he's met natives before, so he'll be the perfect person in there, whether it's friendly or hostile encounters. And plus, he's the right person to help whip the men into shape and make sure they actually do stuff, which they don't really talk about it. But that was one of the things that went wrong with some of the early colony attempts by the British, was that the men got lazy and didn't go well. Now, while they're going, we're also introduced to Pocahontas' tribe, and how they live in harmony with nature, have their days. We see the different characters and all that. Her father is coming back from war with another tribe, and we're told her that she is to be betrothed and eventually marry Kokomum, who is an Indian warrior who really showed off his skills during the recent war. Now, Pocahontas, she does not feel Kokomum is the right person for her because he's too serious. And everyone that hears that, that is what they say, even Mother Willow, Kokomum, but he's so serious. And Pocahontas had recently just had a dream about something that she feel might be pointing towards her destiny, and she doesn't know what it means. And she's given advice, look to the wind, look for sails, look for clouds, and she sees what she feels are clouds, but of course it's the sails from the British ship. And everyone in the tribe knows that the British are here, and they're watching to see what goes on. Now, Pocahontas and John Smith do have a friendly encounter. I mean, there's a little bit of hostility at first, mainly due to Pocahontas' animal friends and other stuff. And, of course, him using the word savage at an inopportune time. I don't really like using the term, but as some people probably will throw it in there, it very much triggers her, which, given the context of the scene, Pocahontas is in the right to feel the way she does when she is said this by someone who they seem to be having a good conversation. All of a sudden, he's like, "Yes, we're here to civilize you savages." Ha 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 ha. But everyone else, it's shots fired, arrows shot, not good. Now these two, throughout the film, they're trying to bridge the gap between their two worlds, and you see a romance is slowly blossoming. Now, the film doesn't really give an indication directly how long it takes place in. I'd say probably a month at most, especially considering how long it would take to build a fort like we see. Probably more like a couple months in film time. But the relationship is believable, but it's not as, and I think part of that is because of the fact that it doesn't give a direct thing, but it kind of feels like it's shorter than what it's trying to imply. I mean, that worked in Beauty and the Beast, but here, maybe just everything around it doesn't work as much. Just with everything else, it just doesn't flow as well. Now, of course, around it, we got the things from both sides. Like I already mentioned, from the native side, these white men are dangerous. That whole thing, Kokomon eventually finding out about the romance, her friend trying to hide it from him, her trying to hide it from her father, of course. But of course, on the English side, we got the normal people who are there starting to have signs of discontent, mainly because all they're doing is digging all day while Radcliffe sits up in his tent, up in his ivory tower, as it were. And the main reason that Radcliffe is there is because he wants to find gold. As he mentions in one of his songs, it's because he wants to outdo what the Spanish found. Now, of course, part of that is him ignoring the fact that gold is not just found everywhere. Not every tribe had it. But you could look at it from his perspective and be like, he didn't know that. He's going off the information. And from the information he had is that Europeans went to America. They found a buttload of riches everywhere they went. And, of course, you can also go into the fact that at this point in time, the whole story about the city of gold, El Dorado, would have popped up. So he's probably thinking that, which is why he's feeling like, yeah. And of course he uses that thing of gold as justification for everything, especially when he figures like, the natives are being hostile. Maybe they know about the gold and they just want to keep it for themselves. They don't want us to have any gold. So we will exterminate them. And of course, once the whole misunderstanding involving the death of Kocoum, a little spoiler there I know, happens, it's the perfect justification for Radcliffe to go to war, and because of the death, perfect thing for the tribe to go to war, calling in additional warriors. And of course, it leads to the famous moment where Pocahontas throws herself in front of John Smith to prevent him from being struck down by her father. And of course, how historically accurate that part is, we'll probably never know. It's probably one of the moments in the film, Story Beast is probably the most historical accurate, if not like some of the tones with the native and Europeans meeting. And the way that it is done, it's tasteful, kind of goes with the whole romance angle, and carries the whole theme about destroying ourselves over our differences. And the dialogue that is spoken from one side to the other really does go with that. Like, Pocahontas' words really do get her father to back down. And of course, everyone on the other side, they were mainly going there because it's what Radcliffe wanted. He got them all riled up. And afterwards, of course, when a certain person gets hurt, there's a mutiny. And this is where the film does kind of break with the tradition we've seen, where a lot of the Disney villains end up dying. And I believe he is the only one in the Renaissance so far who hasn't died. Let's see. Ursula died. Gaston died. McLeach died. I'm trying to remember the name of the villains off the top of my head, so sorry. Jafar technically dies in the sequel, but so he technically dies, he just doesn't die in the theatrical film. So that's like, I'll put that as a half a point. And Scar died, so he's the one that fully breaks the mold. He kind of goes with, like I said, he kind of goes with Jafar, but Jafar technically dies in the sequel, so I'm still counting it. And yeah, I think the only other one that doesn't really die is technically Hades, because he's a god. He's gonna be happy if he gets out of there. Now, since I got all through all that, there's one. Now let's go look at the musical numbers. We got the chorus, Virginia Company, which is heard a couple times throughout the film, and there's like a little reprise when they're at sea. It fits the whole thing, but in this one part of the musical things I remember, but not one of my favorite ones. It just fits it. And of course, Steady as a Beating Drum. We got the main title and then the chorus one, which is the native song. I mean, it works for introducing the tribe, so there's that. And the drum does have a good little rhythm beat. Just Around the River Bend, one of the better songs in it, and of course it's Pocahontas stating her mission statement, as it were, so it continues that Disney tradition. And Judy Kuhn is the one who does the singing voice of Pocahontas, and she does it beautifully, especially at the end where it does the slow moments, or she does a little Steady as a Beating Drum part in there. And of course the animation on it, lovely. Listen with Your Heart, Linda Hunt does a good job doing that. And of course, Mine, 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 the main villain song, really does sum up Governor Radcliffe's mission statement: God, glory, and gold. So that was a good one, like Mine. Definitely a song. I remember parts of it. I remember like the musical part of it. Oh, sorry, it's Radcliffe, sorry. I don't know why I've been saying Radcliffe the whole time. I mainly remember the animation on the beginning part where we like the gold, the Pizarro, and all that stuff. Colors of the Wind. This is the best song in the whole film. Not just from a musical perspective and a lyrical perspective, and of course the performance by Judy, but also the animation on here. Just like how I said that flying scene and Rescuers Down Under was one reason animation is an excellent art form. I said the same thing about the combination of 2D and 3D during the dancing moment in Beauty and the Beast. This right here, the use of color, the use of lines, the flowing movement of it, and all the art way work, part of way to work in like watercolor, Technicolor, and of course a little bit more of a, I don't really want to say primitive, but a more retro tribal art style into it, and it works. And in the final film, this is the closest we get to a love song, but it's more Pocahontas pointing out that what John has been saying about her people is very pig-headed, closed-minded, and that is not the one way to do it. And like the one line that really sticks out with that is like the only people you think are people who look and think like you. Very good point. And then of course that's continued in the two-part song, which is the song that leads into the war, and that's Savages. And there's a lot of lines in there that really do sum up the whole European meeting natives thing, but you can also apply it to every other big thing like this throughout history. And a thing that me and a lot of other people like to refer to as othering. Just think about it. Most of it is from Ratcliffe's side, like, what can you expect from filthy little heathens? Now, there's two versions of the next line. One of it is in the final film where it's, this is what you get when the races are diverse, which I guess works a little bit more commercially, but I like the original line better because it adds a little bit more to the racism aspect of it, and that is the whole disgusting race is like a curse. There's like a couple of other edits. Then the chorus of it goes, savages, savages, barely even humans, savages, savages. They're not like you and me, which means they must be evil. That line right there. They're not like you and me, which means they must be evil. Really does go with it. And even the side that's sung by the natives goes with it. Like their whole chorus thing. They're different from us, which means they can't be trusted. And then the reprise is basically leading into it. And then there's the end title song that is sung by John Cicada and Shanice, which is If I Never Knew You. Now, this is a little interesting because this is where it breaks a little bit with the tradition that started with Beauty and the Beast, whereas the end credit song is a pop version of one of the songs from the film. Because first we had a pop one of Beauty and the Beast, then we had a pop one of Whole New World, then we had Can You Feel the Love Tonight, and here we have a song that's not even in the film, in the final cut. Because originally, this is one of those song moments that was in final animation or close enough to it before it got cut, and that was cut mainly for pacing. And having watched the film again, I can see why it was cut. This is one of those ones where Katzenberg, Eisner, whoever decided to do it, I can see why, because it does interrupt the flow a bit. Now, then again, that's me just watching the final cut as is. If I actually watched the film with it integrated in, I might feel a bit differently. But this feels more like a song that would probably work better with stage pacing than it would with film pacing. So, it is what it is there. It is still a great song, though. It's in my 90s playlist. And the lyrics really do go with the whole theme of one side versus the other. I mean, one of the lines that comes out is, I never knew that fear and hate could be so strong. And of course it does really go with the love between these characters as portrayed in the film, and does kind of go with some of the dialogue they say, but it's one of those things that like could be summed up better with dialogue, or that could be summed up better through music. One of those things. And I know that musical number is on YouTube, so if you've ever been curious to watch it, you can go look at it. It's interesting. Now, going back a little bit into the animation, like I talked about with Color of the Wind, the animators regarding it as being one of the hardest movies they ever produced, mainly due to the complex color schemes, angular shapes, and facial expressions, which is why it was in production for 5 years. It paid off, though, and it was cited as one of the most beautiful animated ones, and it was realistically animated, fluid movements. Now, part of that was, of course, unlike compared to the other films they'd done at that time, and they mentioned this in the making of, is that the people in this film, a lot of them are people that actually lived, and not legendary, mythological, or characters from literature. So they had to try to be a little bit more, I don't want to say faithful because of what I've already talked about, but a little bit more true, I guess you could say. Which is why, when it comes to the animation at the time, this was being handled by the A-team, because it was expected to be a bigger hit. Like I talked about last time, the B-team worked on The Lion King, which of course Lion King turned out to be the bigger hit. I mean, this film wasn't a flop, because this film was made for $55 million, and it made $346 million, so it still turned a profit, but you notice that number is still smaller than the previous one, so it wasn't as big. And plus, it wasn't looked at as fondly by critics. I mean, it did get a lot of nominations. I mean, it won 2 Academy Awards for Best Original Music, or Comedy Score, and Best Original Song for Colors on the Wind, and it won a bunch of other awards, but it's mainly the critical response. Like, even Ebert, even though I've been mentioning like some of what his thoughts have been on the last one, he deemed it inferior. Like, let me find his thing right here. Even though he gave it a 3 out of 4, he said the best looking of the modern animated features and one of the more thoughtful, though he's more critical of the story and portrayal of the villain. He ranked it 5th out of the ones that included Mermaid, Beauty, Aladdin, and Lion King. So he forgot Rescuers on there. I shall say, yeah, the villain isn't super deep, but I chalk that up to him being a personification of the European colonial mindset, which, when this is a film based on more on a legend, the historical accuracy, that makes sense. But that definitely is a slight against the film, because it doesn't make it land as well. I don't know if I'd rank it last, because it'd probably be close between this and Mermaid of those 5 films, which would be last. But here's what Rotten Tomatoes said. Pocahontas means well and has moments of startling beauty, but it's largely a bland, uninspired effort with uneven plotting and an unfortunate lack of fun. I wouldn't say uninspired based on the effort they went into. I definitely would not say bland, because it is fun and all that, but it just doesn't hit as well. So I would say it's only bland when you're comparing it to other entries. Like, if there had been no films in between Mermaid and this probably would have been looked on a little bit better, but it's one of those ones that is only bland in comparison. That's really all I have to say on this one. Pocahontas in whole, it's another beautiful film, another good entry in the Disney Renaissance. If you look past the fact it's not historical, it doesn't have a lot of historical accuracy other than like adapting the legend, you'll have a little bit more fun time, but even with that you don't like it, I can't fault you for that. And at 81 minutes, it's not a long film. It felt like it went by pretty quickly. Now, going into the next film, now we're going to be talking about a straight shot of me watching these films in theaters, because especially by this point, old enough to see a lot of these ones in theaters without them having to worry about me getting restless. And of course, the next one, if Beauty and the Beast is my favorite of the Disney Renaissance, the next film has always been my second favorite. Of course, the next one, definitely just due to some of the subject matter, the darkest of the Disney Renaissance, and that, of course, is going to be The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Till then, everybody.